My name is Marlene Dyer, 38 years old from rural South Dakota. I thought forgiving my ex made me strong, until he came back and tried to steal everything I'd built. I let him sleep 200 feet from my house, never knowing he was plotting to ruin me all over again. Before we dive into this gripping story of betrayal and revenge, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful narration like this one. If you enjoy real stories, give this video a thumbs up, it really helps support the channel. Now, let's get into it. The wind had picked up just before sunset, whistling low across the prairie like it always did before a storm. I was finishing up in the barn, checking on a nervous gelding with a cracked hoof, when the dogs started barking, deep, frenzied barks that told me this wasn't a rabbit or a tumbleweed. I wiped my hands on my jeans, told Bo and Sadie to hush, and stepped out into the fading light. Dust danced in the air. The ranch house sat quiet across the yard, its porch bathed in gold from the low sun. Then I saw him, standing on my porch like a ghost I thought I'd buried. Lean frame, denim jacket, hands in his pockets like he owned the place. 7 years hadn't aged him much, though the lines around his eyes were deeper, his hair a shade grayer at the temples. Jonah. I froze halfway across the yard, every instinct in my body screaming turn around. Go back to the barn, pretend you didn't see him. But he raised a hand in a lazy wave, and it was too late. Marlene, he called out, like it hadn't been nearly a decade since he walked out on me without warning, taking half our money, a chunk of my heart, and leaving me to pick up the pieces. I kept walking, slow and steady, heart pounding like a hammer against my ribs. When I reached the porch, I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, let the weight of silence do what words couldn't. He smiled. That same cocky grin that once made my knees weak and later made me want to punch a hole through a wall. Mind if we talk? I crossed my arms. What are you doing here? He sighed, glanced at the horizon like maybe he was trying to look humble. I messed up. A lot. I know that. But I've been thinking about this place. About you. I want to make things right. I almost laughed. Make things right? Like he could undo years of struggle with a few empty words. 7 years, I said quietly. Not a word. Not even a sorry. I know. I got lost, March. After the divorce. After everything. I hit bottom. You didn't hit bottom, I snapped. You chose to jump. He looked down, shamed or just pretending to be. I couldn't tell. That was the problem with Jonah, you never knew if he meant what he said, or if it was all part of the charm. Offensive. I'm not asking for much, he said. Just a chance to help. Get back on my feet. Maybe stay in the bunkhouse for a bit. The prairie was quiet behind him, the sky turning pink. I should have told him to leave, but something held me back. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe curiosity, or maybe I just wanted to see what kind of snake slithered back into my life. I told myself it was temporary, just a few nights in the bunkhouse until Jonah found his footing. It had once been our shared project, nothing fancy, just 4 walls, a cot, and a wood-burning stove for cold nights. After the divorce, I used it for seasonal help, never kept it cozy on purpose. It wasn't meant for comfort. It was meant for distance. Jonah didn't seem to mind. He hauled in a single duffel bag, like he'd been living out of it for years. Said all the right things, thanked me for the second chance, promised to pull his weight, swore he wasn't that man anymore. For the first few days, he kept his promise. Up at dawn. Fixed a section of broken fence by the east pasture without being asked. Helped muck out stalls. Even brought coffee to the barn one morning like we were old friends instead of old wounds. But something about it didn't sit right. It was the way he walked around like he still belonged. The way he paused in the main house like he was remembering something fond, his hand brushing the doorframe of the kitchen, or how his eyes lingered on the photo above the mantel. A photo of me and Pepper, my first rescue horse. Taken the week Jonah left, he never mentioned it. One night, I caught him in the barn after hours. Said he was checking on the sick gelding, But when I got closer, he wasn't near the stalls, he was standing by the office door, keys in his hand. "What are you doing?" I asked. He startled just for a second. "Thought I heard something. Was gonna lock up." The office didn't make noise. It didn't even have windows facing the paddock. But I let it go. For the moment, the next morning, the ledgers on my desk had been moved. Nothing was missing, but the pages weren't where I left them. I always leave them in order: expenses on the left, intake reports on the right. Now they were flipped. A week later, I found the back gate unlatched. 4 horses had wandered toward the outer pasture. It could have been an accident, but I triple-check that gate every night. "Always, guess you're gettin' forgetful," Jonah said with a chuckle when I brought it up. I forced a smile. "Maybe. But I wasn't." Then came the mail. One of the envelopes from the feed supplier had been opened and sloppily resealed. I only found out because the invoice was inside the electric bill envelope. That night, I locked the office door and took the ledgers into the house. I told myself I was being paranoid. That the past was coloring my present. That people change, but deep down, I knew what I was seeing weren't coincidences. They were cracks, little ones, sure, but if you've ever lived through a betrayal, you know how the smallest crack can split everything wide open, and Jonah was chipping at the edges. The past has a way of creeping in when things go quiet, like wind under a door you thought you sealed shut. That night, after locking the ledgers in my bedroom closet and double-checking the office, I poured a whiskey, sat by the window, and let my mind wander where it didn't want to go. To Jonah, to before the rot. We were young then. Too young, maybe. I was 26 when I bought the land, 30 scraggly acres outside Custer that no one else wanted. Jonah came into the picture like a cowboy dream, rugged, hungry, and full of promises. He helped me build the first barn, string fence wire, even came up with the name Iron Willow Ranch. Said it sounded strong but graceful. Like me, back then, I believed that was love, but Jonah was always restless. Couldn't sit still unless he was holding a beer or holding a grudge. He loved the horses, sure, but he hated the work, early mornings, late vet calls, and the constant pressure of barely scraping by. The charm he wore in town didn't follow him home. Some days, he didn't come home at all. I remember the first time I found out he was lying. I'd just closed a deal with a private client from Colorado, rehabbing a mare for $5,000 over 3 months. The kind of contract that kept the lights on. When I went to deposit the check, the bank teller frowned. Said our account was overdrawn. Confused, I asked for a statement. Jonah had drained over $6,000 in 2 weeks. ATV parts. A down payment on a trailer I never saw. A hotel room in Deadwood. I confronted him that night. He didn't even deny it, said he'd earned it, whatever that meant. Threw my success back in my face, said I thought I was better than him just because I handled the books. That was the night he called me just a glorified stable girl with a savior complex. I should have left then. Should have kicked him out and changed the locks. Instead, I tried to fix it. We got counseling. Well, I did. He showed up twice and quit. Said I made him feel small. 3 months later, I woke up to find his side of the bed cold. His clothes gone. His name scrubbed from the business account, but not before he took another $2,000. No note. No call, just gone. The bank nearly foreclosed that year. I worked 16-hour days, sold half my equipment, took odd jobs around town to stay afloat. Somehow, I made it, but I learned 2 things. 1, I could survive without him. 2, I couldn't trust him. Not ever again. So now, with him in my bunkhouse, poking around my records, walking the land like he still owned it, I knew better. The past doesn't stay buried out here, it has teeth, and Jonah had come back to bite. By the 2nd month, Jonah had wormed his way into nearly every part of the ranch's routine. He mucked stalls, ran fence line, even started leading trail rides for tourists. At face value, he was pulling his weight. But I've lived with wolves before, and I never forget a smile that hides teeth. Folks around town started stopping by more. Hank from the feed store swung in one afternoon with extra grain we didn't order. Jonah called it in, he said, tipping his hat. Said y'all were behind. We weren't. I checked the books that night, every order was up to date. And the extra grain? It wasn't billed to us. Hank had put it on his own account, trusting Jonah's word. The next day, I asked Jonah about it. He just shrugged, didn't want to bother you. Figured we'd need it soon anyway. His tone was light, casual. But something about it gnawed at me. He was testing boundaries. Neighbors who used to keep a respectful distance started mentioning his name with a strange fondness. He's really turned things around, I heard one woman say at the co-op. Good to see a man take responsibility. I bit my tongue. I knew what they saw, a charming cowboy trying to redeem himself. What they didn't see was the way his eyes flicked around the house when he thought I wasn't looking. Or how the key to the office kept disappearing from the hook and reappearing in odd places, under the sugar jar, in the glove box of my truck. Then there were the phone calls. I'd hear his voice behind the barn at dusk, low and clipped. Too far for me to catch words, but his body language always tightened when I got close. Once, I stepped around the feed shed and saw him spin around, pocketing his phone like a teenager caught in a lie. Just checking in with an old friend, he said. I forced a smile. Funny. I thought you didn't have any left. He laughed. That same too easy laugh he used when he was hiding something. That night, I locked the office again and checked the login history on my computer. The ranch's financial software had been accessed at 2:37 a.m. I hadn't been awake. But someone had. I changed the password, double-checked every file. Nothing appeared altered, but that didn't comfort me. Jonah didn't need to change anything, he just needed to know where the cracks were. I started keeping a notebook, times, dates, odd behavior. I didn't say anything to him. Not yet. Instead, I let him think he was winning, that I was still the fool who once believed love could survive betrayal. He kept smiling, playing nice with the neighbors, tossing hay and praise like nothing had ever happened, but I recognized the glint behind his grin. It was the same smile he gave me the night before he emptied our bank account and walked out of my life, and this time, I knew better. It was just past twilight when I heard him. I'd gone out to the barn to check on Daisy, an older mare that didn't handle storms well. The wind was coming in fast off the plains, bending the grass low and rattling the tin roof. I moved quietly, used to the rhythm of the ranch at night, the low snorts from the horses, the hum of the fence line buzzing alive. But then I heard another sound, a voice, low, urgent. It was coming from behind the barn, near the tractor shed. I paused, the lantern in my hand casting a flicker against the hay bales. At first, I thought maybe Jonah was just talking to himself. He did that sometimes. But then I heard him say my name. I turned out the lantern and followed the sound, keeping to the shadows like an old coyote. My boots sank into the soft dirt. The wind helped cover my steps. She doesn't suspect anything, Jonah was saying. Keeps everything in her office as banking info, deed, even the tax IDs. Still uses the same login. A pause. Yeah, I'm working on it. These country folks love a redemption story. I've got half the neighbors eating out of my hand. All I need's a signature. Once I have power of attorney, we're in. I nearly dropped the lantern. I backed up slowly, heart thudding so loud I swore he could hear it. My hands were cold, even with the summer air clinging warm to my skin. Power of attorney, he wasn't just snooping. He was planning a full-scale takeover. Jonah always did know how to play the long game. But this time, I had seen it coming. I'd sensed the shift, watched the lies build like storm clouds behind his smile. I just hadn't expected him to move so soon. I slipped away and circled back toward the barn entrance. My mind was racing. How much did he know? How close was he to forging a document, or tricking some notary into signing off on a lie? Inside the barn, I sat down on an overturned bucket and stared at the dusty ground. I felt sick. Not just at what he was doing, but at myself, for letting him in, for giving him even a foothold in the place I built from nothing. The horses rustled in their stalls, sensing my unease. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the notebook I'd been keeping. Wrote down the time, the place, the exact words I'd heard. My hand shook as I underlined power of attorney. This wasn't just about money, this was about control, about erasing me from the ranch completely. I stood, the lantern trembling in my grasp. I looked out toward the darkness where Jonah had just stood. He thought I was still the girl he'd once walked away from, still naive, still forgiving. He had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead, and he wouldn't see the next one coming. By dawn, I had a plan. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the porch swing with a mug of cold coffee and my old .38 tucked beneath the blanket on my lap. Just in case. The prairie stretched quiet and wide before me, but I didn't trust the silence anymore. Not with a snake curled up in my bunkhouse. Jonah had made one mistake. He assumed I still trusted him enough not to look behind the curtain. That I was still the same woman he'd left shattered and silent all those years ago. He was wrong. By noon, I'd driven into Rapid City to meet with Claire Thurman, my lawyer since the divorce. Claire was sharp, no nonsense, and didn't waste time on pity. He's talking about power of attorney, I told her, sliding the notebook across her desk. He's been sneaking into my office, trying to get into the books. He knows too much. Claire flipped through the notes, eyes narrowing. Do you have any recordings? Not yet. But I will. We updated every legal document, deed ownership, business registration, my will, even the land trust. Everything that had once had Jonah's name attached to it, however faintly, was reviewed and reinforced. Claire added language that made it crystal clear. No one could act on my behalf without my explicit written consent. Notarized and filed in person. By the time I left her office, I'd signed a stack of papers thick enough to kill a snake with. On the way back, I stopped at a supply store and picked up 2 wireless trail cameras with night vision. Not for the coyotes this time, but for the real predator sleeping 200 feet from my house. That evening, I installed one above the office door, angled discreetly from under the eaves. The second went inside, nestled between 2 books on the shelf facing the desk. I tested them both, silent, motion-activated, uploading footage straight to my phone and a hidden hard drive in the cabinet. Then I changed every password I had, banking, emails, ranch management software. I even set up 2-factor authentication on my phone. Every file got backed up, encrypted, and locked in a fireproof safe. I started carrying the safe key around my neck. I also moved the most sensitive paperwork into a locked box under the floorboards of my bedroom closet. Jonah might be charming, but he wasn't clever enough to dig beneath the boards without leaving signs. That night, I slept a little easier. Jonah noticed none of it. Or if he did, he pretended not to. He was all smiles the next morning, flipping pancakes and asking if I wanted help restocking feed. I smiled back, just as sweet. Sure, I said. Let's check inventory together this afternoon. Let him think I was still playing along, because now I wasn't just protecting myself, I was building the noose, and he was walking straight into it. 3 days later, I got the footage I'd been waiting for. It was just past 2 a.m. when the notification pinged on my phone, a motion alert from the camera inside the office. My heart pounded as I sat up in bed, fumbling with the screen. I tapped the video feed and there he was, Jonah. He moved slow, careful, like someone who'd done this before. He wore gloves, a cap pulled low. He went straight for the filing cabinet and pulled out the drawer where I used to keep the property deeds and banking records. Finding it empty, he paused, then turned to my desk. That's when I saw it. He pulled a piece of paper from his jacket and laid it on the desk. I zoomed in, heart racing. Even in grainy black and white, I could make out the words across the top, durable power of attorney. My name was already printed on it. His hand hovered over the signature line. Then he reached into his back pocket for a pen. I didn't wait to see more. By the time Jonah came out for breakfast, I was waiting for him on the porch, my phone in one hand and a folder in the other. Mornin', he said with a yawn. Coffee ready? Sit down, I said, voice like steel. He blinked, surprised. What's going on? I held up the phone and hit play, his face drained of color. His cocky smirk faltered for the first time in weeks. When the footage ended, I opened the folder and slid out a printed copy of the power of attorney he'd tried to forge, along with a notarized statement from Claire confirming I'd never signed one. "You broke into my office," I said. "You forged legal documents. You tried to steal my ranch." Again. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. Don't insult me with another lie." He took a slow step forward. "Mar, listen." "No. You listen." I stood, fire in my voice now. "I never forgave you. I never forgot what you did. I let you back because I needed to see for myself if you'd changed. And?" I stepped off the porch, face to face with him. "You didn't." For a moment, he looked lost. "Not sorry, just angry that he'd lost the game." "You need to leave," I said. "Now." "I already spoke to the sheriff. If you're not off my land by nightfall, they'll escort you." He stared at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. Good, he left without another word, but the next morning, I found tire tracks in the grass behind the barn. Someone had driven up the back road in the middle of the night. The sheriff said he was gone, but I knew better. Men like Jonah don't disappear, they linger, they wait, and sometimes, they come back when you least expect it. The envelope came in the morning mail, tucked between a utility bill and a flyer for a tractor sale. No return address. No postmark. Just my name scrawled in block letters across the front, like a child had written it. But my gut clenched the moment I touched it. I took it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and stared at it for a long minute before sliding my knife under the flap. Inside was a single Polaroid. The photo showed me, asleep in bed. Curled on my side, one hand beneath the pillow, the lamp casting a soft glow from the night I'd fallen asleep reading. I recognized the moment. I remembered it, but I sure as hell hadn't taken that photo. I stood there, breath caught somewhere between fear and fury. My bedroom window was locked every night. My doors were bolted. No one should have been able to get that close enough to stand at the foot of my bed and snap a picture without waking me. My fingers trembled as I flipped the Polaroid over, nothing on the back. No note. No message. Just silence pressed into glossy paper. I called the sheriff. He came out an hour later, took the photo and the envelope into evidence, and promised to look into it. But there was no forced entry. No footprints. No fingerprints. No camera to show who left it in the mailbox. Just me, a photo I never posed for, and the rising certainty that Jonah wasn't finished. "You think it was him?" Sheriff Dawes asked. Flipping the photo under a gloved hand. "I know it was." Dawes sighed. "We'll keep an eye out. If he's still in the county, we'll find him." But I knew better. Jonah had always been slippery, always 2 steps ahead of consequences. He could charm his way into places and out of trouble like it was a card trick. But this wasn't charm anymore. This was a message. "I see you. You're never safe." That night, I moved my bed away from the window. I installed another lock on the door. Bought blackout curtains, a new security light, and kept the .38 on the nightstand instead of in the drawer. The dog stayed inside from then on. Sadie wouldn't sleep. She paced from window to window, tail low, ears twitching. I sat up most of the night with her, watching the wind bend the grass through the crack in the curtain. Every shadow felt like it had eyes. Jonah was gone. But his presence still lingered like smoke in the walls, thick, suffocating, and impossible to ignore. He hadn't wanted the ranch just for the money, he wanted me to lose it. To feel powerless again. To look over my shoulder like I used to when he'd come home drunk and smiling. But I wasn't the same woman, and if Jonah thought he could scare me back into silence, he'd forgotten who he was dealing with, because I wasn't afraid of ghosts, not anymore. Summer rolled in heavy that year, hot, dry, and full of change. The sheriff called me just after sunrise one morning while I was out in the east pasture, watching a pair of colts buck in the tall grass. I answered on instinct, wiping sweat from my brow with a gloved hand. "We found him," Dawes said. "Couple counties over, trying to use a fake ID. The charges are holding." He won't be bothering you again. I stood there for a long moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the wind whip across the field. The Colts kept playing, oblivious. Life, moving on, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I exhaled. Jonah was finally out of my life. For good this time. News spread through town faster than wildfire in dry brush. Once folks learned what Jonah had tried to pull, how he'd nearly stolen the ranch out from under me with charm and a pen, they rallied. Not out of pity, but out of something stronger, respect. They stopped calling it our ranch. They started calling it mine. Donations trickled in to help repair the north barn. Local kids volunteered for weekend chores. Clients booked early for fall, saying things like, "We trust you, Marlene, and you built this with your own 2 hands." And I had every inch of Iron Willow Ranch bore my fingerprints, my sweat, my nights spent shivering in fear and mornings spent fighting to believe in something better. I wasn't the woman Jonah left behind years ago. I was the woman who stood her ground and didn't flinch. I renamed the ranch that week. Took down the old sign and painted a new one by hand, Second Wind Rescue, because that's what it was. My second wind. My second chance, not just to survive, but to thrive. I kept the photo Jonah left me, locked in the safe, tucked behind a folder of legal files. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to remember what vigilance looks like. What it costs to let the wrong people back in. Forgiveness is a beautiful thing. But so is strength, and strength means knowing when to close the door, and when to bolt it shut. At dusk, I sat on the porch with Sadie at my feet and Bo curled beside her. The fields were golden, the horses grazing in peace. The wind blew soft over the grass, not a threat this time, but a comfort. I looked out across the land I nearly lost and smiled, not because it was easy, or over, but because I was still standing. Still fighting, still free. Jonah tried to take everything from me. Instead, he reminded me who I really was, and that was the last mistake he'll ever make. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Subscribe for more gripping true stories of betrayal, strength, and revenge, and tap the bell so you never miss an upload. Got a story of your own or a twist you didn't see coming? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.